Namaskar, dear learners and viewers. I am Dr. Satish Gaikwad. We will be today discussing the sample selection process in research. Earlier, we had already discussed research design, types of hypothesis, and types of sample selection process. Whatever sample selection process we are discussing today, we have already discussed the types of sampling methods. So, when research has to be conducted, it is very important that how to go ahead with the sample selection process. A sample, what is a sample? A sample is nothing but the group of population or elements from which a set of sample has to be selected. A population, group of population or set of elements from which a subset will be selected for the research. That is nothing but the your research sample from a group of population or set of elements or objects. You may be selecting a subset. When we talk about the sample selection, when you are going for any research, your sample may be having a very large distribution. It may take lot of time to achieve the interaction with each and every sample or collection of data from each and every sample, which may become a cumbersome process, time consuming process, and it may cost a lot, which may create lot of problem or hindrance to your research project, and you may sometimes fail to bring outcome of that particular research in time bound manner, and you may fail to curtail the budget of the research. Moreover, the another important component of any sample selection method is you have to take care that the margin of error, the standard deviation of the sample has to be minimized. That means your sample should be true. Whatever characteristics of a research design has been thought, accordingly the character of the sample should meet. The population of sample should be true to your research problem. Basically, when we are talking about the sample selection process, as I already said, the sample selection is nothing but the sample selection involves choosing the subset of a sample or population or element of the desired research group. Whatever desired research target population you have decided, from that population you are selecting a subset. This is to reduce the efforts, time consuming efforts, and to reduce the cost. To make it cost effective measure and to make it to bring the outcome in the time bound manner, you will be using the sample selection process. When we are talking about the sample selection process, what are the key steps involved in sample selection process? The key steps involved in the sample selection process, first of all, a researcher has to identify what is the research problem or objective of the research. When a researcher identifies the research problem or objective of the research, that itself make it clear that what kind of sample the researcher want to target. The sample may be a population, the sample may be an element, the sample may be any object. For example, if I just want to give an example, the researcher may be having an objective to study the cancer patient. He or she may be desiring to do the research on the cancer patients. Here, definitely when you have identified this objective, your research objective itself is making clear that you are going to select the population group or you are going to select the sample from the patients who are suffering from cancer. Therefore, the first and most important part of the research is to identify the research objective or problem. Based on that, it will become very easy to identify the target population of your research. The next component is defining the sampling frame. Now, what is defining sampling frame? When you have identified the target population. The target population may be anything, as I gave example of the cancer patient. For example, if we talk about the survey of the school kids in Delhi and NCR region. Delhi itself is having plus or minus 2 crores of population. And in that 2 crores of population, there are n number of the primary or high schools, secondary schools in Delhi. From that, your target population is school going students. Means you have already identified your target population, and now you have to define, you have to frame the sample, you have to decide the sampling frame. Now, what is the sampling frame? You have to collect the data of that target population or your sample, and you have to systematically arrange it. Whatever the details you are having, you may be having the name of the population, you may be having the age group, you may be having other factors in which class they are studying. All those things has to be brought into a frame, sample frame. Defining sample frame, you have to collect the data, and data has to be systematically framed. Based on this data only, you may be going for so many analyses. After the identifying the population, target population, defining the sampling frame, the next and most important part is selecting an appropriate sampling method. Last class we had already discussed what are the appropriate sampling methods. There may be two types of sampling methods, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In further coming slides, we may be discussing these in details. However, in previous one of the sessions, I had thoroughly taken a half an hour session on this. Now, after selecting the method of sampling, it may be a probability sampling or non-probability sampling. It is important to determine the size of the population. Size of the population, determining the size of the population is it is very crucial phase, because if I talk about if I want to give an example, for example, you want to do a study on the doctors in Delhi. As I said, Delhi is having 2 crores plus or minus population, and there are several hospitals, and in several hospitals n number of doctors are working. It is practically impossible to bring out a study on each, and if you want to collect the data from each and every doctor working in a particular hospital and in and around the Delhi NCR. In such case, if there are 10,000 doctors working in Delhi NCR, you will select a sample size of your study, for example, 500. That particular sample of 500 doctors will represent whatever study you will conduct. The outcome of the study may be generalized for all the doctors. So, accordingly, the sample size is decided. The sample size that will be bringing the precision to your outcome. Your data will be reliable, and your outcomes will be maybe generalized, and that may hold true to the general population of doctors. Let us know sample selection process in details. Define the research question and objective. As I already said, before selecting sample, you have to define the research question or objective. Research question may be, you may be going for survey of any historical event, or you may be going for the survey of any social happenings. You may be conducting scientific research, or you may be conducting medical research. In that, research problem has to be identified. As I said, one of the examples, you may be working on cancer. You may be working on the ethical aspects in the medical fields, where your target population may be doctors, where you may be collecting data, or you may be doing the research on some effect of the drugs. That will be your research problem. So identifying research problem will itself first step becomes a first step to decide what is your sample population. Identifying the target population, as you set a goal, accordingly you decide the target population. For example, you may be decided to work on the one of the topics, smoking causes cancer. As I gave this example in previous classes also, then it means that you are going to select the population, your identified target population is smokers. So in this way, you will be clearly defining the target population. Now, after deciding the target population, as I briefed you, one has to specify the sampling frame. In sampling frame, entire data on whatever samples you want to collect or whatever populations you want to study, you have to just you have to enter data. For example, you may be keeping the data in Excel sheet. That entire framework has to be developed, in which every data shall be recorded, and the recorded data in a particular frame will be available with the researcher. That will help in the further analysis process. Now, choosing sample, there are several methods to choose the sample. As I said, the types or methods of sampling process. In sampling process, there are two types of sampling methods. One of the method is probability sampling. Another method is non-probability sampling. In probability sampling method, each and every element of the population or targeted group will be having a chance of its representation. There are some types of the probability sampling methods. Let us discuss each and every probability sampling method subgroups. The first one is simple random sampling method. The name itself suggests that it is a simple random sampling method. In this method, each and every element of the population is having a chance of probability to be represented or to be selected in the research study. However, here by simple random method, you may be having 10,000 population. In 10,000 population, randomly you are selecting. You may be selecting first person, then again you may be selecting third person, again you may be selecting seventh person. Like that, if you want to select 100 from 10,000 population, randomly you are selecting 100 people or 100 elements and subjecting to your study. That is nothing but simple random sampling method. Then comes to the stratified sampling method. In the stratified sampling method, the population is divided into subgroups, and then from that subgroup, the random sampling is done, as we have done in the simple random sampling method. But here there are so many subgroups. From those subgroups, randomly we are selecting nth number of the population. Maybe you are selecting first, second, third, or suddenly 10th. Randomly you are selecting. You may be having 10,000 population divided into 5 subgroups. From each group, randomly you are selecting. After that, there is a systemic sampling method. In systemic sampling method, you are again selecting a sample randomly, but here you are applying a systematic method. For example, you might have applied a method where every 10th number of the population is getting selected. You may be having 100 population with you. From that, every 10th, you may be having 1000 population. From that, every tenth of the element you are getting selected, means from 1000, every 10th number you are selecting to your study, and accordingly you are selecting 100 people from thousands population. So this is systematic sampling, random sampling method. Another is clustered sampling method. The population is divided into clusters and then random sample of clusters is selected. Why this cluster sampling method is used? For example, you one of the your studies, you might have taken the large regional dispersed population for your study. Maybe you might have taken a study where you want to study the health and hygiene of high school or senior secondary school going students in around all the states of India. Then it will become very difficult to go and collect the data from each and every part of the country. There are so many districts in one state, and there are so many taluka places. So what the researcher will do means, to represent, for example, from Delhi, he or she may be collecting 4-5 schools. From Karnataka, 4-5 schools. Those 4-5 schools which had been selected from one state, that will become a cluster. From that cluster, again you are randomly selecting the sample. That will, whatever outcome will be in your research, that will generalize to the entire population, targeted population. That is nothing but the cluster sampling method. Now, after that, second sampling method, most probably the probability sampling method is basically always used in the quantitative research, a scientific research. But when it comes to the descriptive research, non-scientific research, non-experimental research, their non-probability sampling methods are used. In non-probability sampling method, the subclasses, there are subclasses. For example, convenient sampling method, the name itself suggests a sample is conveniently selected. For example, if you are a doctor and you are working in a hospital and you want to study on the delivery, the pregnant women, means whatever pregnant women coming to that particular hospital, immediately you are selecting that as your subject of study. Conveniently you are selecting which is easily available and easily accessible. The sample is selected in the easily available and easily accessible form. That is nothing but convenient sampling method, very simple sampling method. Purposive sampling is based on the purpose of the study. As I already quoted, smokers. You want to study on the smokers. Smoking causes cancer, in that you want to study on smokers. Smoker, because of the purpose of the study, you are selecting smokers. Snowball sampling. In snowball sampling, what happens? The participant, the first participant, he or she will refer next sample, next subject of the study, and accordingly it will become a chain. The other subject also suggests the next sample. This will become a chain. That's why it is also called as the chain sampling method. Quota sampling. In quota sampling, what happens? You may be having large number of sample or subject groups of study, where subject groups of study may be having different subgroups. For example, male, female, like that. In that, what happens? Based on the objectives of the study, the researcher may be deciding that he or she may be deciding a quota, that 40% of the population will be taken from male group and remaining 60% population may be taken from female group. This is nothing but deciding with a quota. This population will be having this much quota in the research, and this population will be given this much quota in the sample selection. That's why it is called as the quota sampling method. Now the determination of the sample size. Determination of the sample size is a very crucial phase of the research, because whatever outcome of the research, the reliability and the coherence and the relevance of the research depends on the determination of the sample size. There are several methods to determine the sample size. For example, there may be statistical methods where coherence formula is basically used for the sample determining the sample size. There are several statistical or some other methods are available through which one may decide the sample size. In next class, we may discuss in detail what are the methods for the selection of the sample size. But in selection of the sample size, population size, what is the size of the population, that is very important, and confidence level of your outcome. The confidence level usually basically says that it should be 95% to 99% confidence level should be there in the outcome of the research. What is means by confidence level? Whatever outcome comes. For example, you have set the objective that 100% result should be like this. If I say it in layman's words, a paper is with 100% with 100 marks maximum. In 100 marks, if you get 50% marks, that is second class, but in research, second class is not acceptable. The outcome of the research should be 95 to 99% when it is said that the confidence level of the outcome of the research is good. So the confidence level is also one of the important factors. Apart from that, the marginal error in the research sample selection, that is also very important. Marginal error and standard deviation. What is meant by standard deviation? Standard deviation is nothing but the dispersion of your sample from the mean whatever you have decided. If maximum dispersion is there, it may affect the outcome of the results. Therefore, the standard deviation should be minimum, and the margin of error in the sample selection, basically 3% to 8% is acceptable, and the level of confidence should be 95 to 99%. So after the deciding the determination of the sample size, implementing sample plan is also one of the important factors, where a researcher collects all the data and systematically they arrange the data for the analysis purpose. If you arrange this data systematically, then only the data can be analyzed. That's why sampling plan is also one of the very important components. Now, after collecting the data, what you will do with the data? The data has to be collected, and the collected data has to be subjected to the analysis. Basically, there are 4 types of analysis done: descriptive, diagnostic, prescriptive and predictive. What happens? In descriptive, basically you are observing the phenomena, and in that you are giving the descriptive outcomes based on the observations. In diagnostic, as we say diagnostic in the cases of patients, there your outcome of the research is analyzed to identify the causes of any event, and after analyzing the causes of the event, you may be giving some suggestions to overcome the causes of the, or to limit the causes of the particular action, whatever you have identified in your research. Predictive, in predictive you may be forecasting the future based on the historical events you have studied in your research, or whatever observations you have done in your research. Based on that, you may be giving the suggestive outcomes of suggestive forecast of the future. In prescriptive, based on the observations of your study, you may be recommending the suggestive reforms or suggestive measures in your study. So basically, sample selection process is a very important and crucial tool to make your research generalizable. Whatever outcome of the research is you have got, to make it generalizable, generalization of the research should be reliable, it should be true to the your hypothesis, and it should be scientifically tested. When it is scientifically tested, it should not fail. Whatever the outcome of your research, that should be true to the observation you proposed and phenomena whatever happening naturally. So sample selection process is very important process to select the reliable sample, to minimize the error in the selection of the sample, to minimize the standard deviation, and to curtail the time consumption, and to curtail the exceeding of the budget in the research. This is we have discussed, and hope with this I will conclude this session. Thank you one and all.